Hey, welcome back. The next few videos are about CSV, which is a popular data format. It stands for comma separated values. It's just a way of taking data, usually tabular data, and just sticking it in a file and storing it so that we can then do something with it later. A lot of the data sets that you might work with, whether in Python or another language, are probably or are often CSV data sets. So things like crime records, I'm going to show you one of those in just a moment. From county governments or state governments, things like environmental data, credit card transactions from your bank, you can often download in CSV files. So it's a common format that we can work with. So we're going to talk about how we do that in Python. First, let's just talk about CSV itself. Like I said, it's a common file format for tabular data. So CSV does not really suit all sorts of data. It needs to be homogeneous data that follows a pattern. So let me show you an example file. Here is a really simple CSV file called fighters.csv. It contains information about fighters from the Street Fighter games, and the first row in any CSV file contains the headers. The headers basically set up what the data is. So you can see, first of all, we've got a bunch of commas separating values, but the first row has name, comma, so that tells us, all right, the first thing before every comma on each row is a name, so Ken or Blanca. Then the next thing is country, Japan or USA. And then lastly, we have height in centimeters, like 165 or 214. So a very simple data set, but take a look at something like this. This is from the Sacramento, I don't know if it's the state or the county of Sacramento or the city of Sacramento, but some government in Sacramento. This is their crime records for the year 2006. I downloaded it off their website. And we can see basically it contains a ton of crime records, and it's, I don't know how many thousands of lines. It would take me forever to scroll. Okay, yeah, almost 8,000 lines. Each line contains things, here are the headers up top, like the crime date time, the address, the beat, the district, a crime description. So you can actually see on basically New Year's Eve, as soon as it hit midnight, there was, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Wow. Jeez, I didn't actually take the time to go through this. That is a lot of crimes on midnight of New Year's Eve. Wow. Okay, well, we can see things like the time, but we can also see, what is there? Trying to pass a fictitious check or burglary of a vehicle. So you could do things with these data sets, of course. That's kind of the point of making them public. And the first step of doing anything with a data set in Python is importing it in. So this video is going to focus on reading files like this in. And we can just read a CSV file like any other file, except it's not really a good idea. There's actually built-in CSV module that helps us read CSV files in particular a lot easier. But you could do something like this. With open fighters.csv as file, like anything that we've done already. If I head over to Python 3, I just paste that in. I have the fighters.csv file in the same directory. If you see what we get here, it gives us one giant string. So it's up to us to actually parse it. And what would we want the data to look like? Do we want each row to be a list and then put the entire thing in a giant list? Do we want dictionaries? So it's actually a good exercise to go through and try and parse this. What would you do? You would probably, or what I would do, I would split on the new line characters. Each one of those gives us a list, or it would give us a list of a bunch of rows. And then within each row, we split on the comma characters. And that should get us most of the way there. But anyway, we don't have to worry about that because we can use the built-in CSV module, which will handle this and parse it all for us, assuming our data conforms to the CSV standards. So yeah, don't do it that way. What you want to use instead is the CSV module. And there's actually two different ways of reading in CSV. And the first thing I'll show you is called reader. So when you use the conventional reader, it will basically give you each row as a list. So it allows you to iterate over rows of the CSV. Each row is a separate list. Then there's dict reader. And it's kind of like reader, it reads in the data, except instead of each row being a list, the rows are what's known as ordered dicts. Dict, with a T there. I don't know if that was very clear. We'll go into detail into what that actually is once we get there in just a bit, but it's just different than a list. Think of it as a dictionary with order so that it remembers what order things were in, unlike a regular dictionary. So two different ways. I'm going to show you both. Let's start by focusing on the reader example. So I'm just going to copy this actually, and I have a file I've already made called read.py, and I have this example, which I said was the bad way of doing it, just a traditional file.read. Now I'm going to paste in using reader. Okay, so if we look at what we have to do, we have to import the CSV module and just import the part we need, which is reader. This part's all the same. Open the file with open as file. Then this is the part where we actually call reader and we pass in the file that we've opened. And what it gives back to us, if we looked at it, if I just print CSV reader and we look at what it gives us back, let's quit out of here and run Python read. It's this CSV reader object. When we iterate over the object, however, it gives us a nice iterator, and each row in the CSV file is represented as a list. So if I print each row now by iterating over CSV reader, save the file, what do we get? There we go. One row, one list. It's important to note the first row of the headers is still included. So it doesn't actually parse the headers or do anything with them. It just puts them as the first row, just like any other row. It splits on the commas and then puts them all in a row. So we can work with this data in this form. For example, let's say I wanted to print out something really simple like, Ken is from USA. So fighter name is from fighter country. So what we could do, instead of row, we could say for fighter in CSV reader. And then the thing when you're working with a traditional reader is that you have to access data based off of an index. So the name is going to be index 0 and country is index 1. So that is a bit of a downside, so you have to use numbers like this, fighter 0, instead of being able to say fighter name. Fighter 0 is from fighter 1, like that. And if we run that, we don't need to print the row. And we execute it. This is what we get. Looks good, except we still get this name is from country. We don't want that, most likely. We don't want those headers. So just a quick note, what this actually is here, CSV Reader, it's an iterator, just like in the generator section. Remember we talked about you go over an iterator once, you kind of exhaust it. So if I went over it once here, if I tried to do another, like if I just did the exact same thing again here, for fighter and CSV Reader, we can do the exact same thing. If I try and do that, we actually only get one copy because we've exhausted the iterator. We're at the end. There are no rows. There's no data in the iterator to keep moving forward on. It can't call next anymore. But we can take advantage of that. If we don't want the headers, we can just call not vexed, next CSV Reader. That moves us forward once, and then it starts from the row after the headers. So if I save and now I run this, we don't get the headers at the beginning. But if you did want the headers and you wanted to work with the data and you don't want to just print it out or go through it one time, you could turn it into a list very easily. So let me just duplicate this, keep that example. You could easily just let's do list CSV Reader. We'll just call it data equals list CSV Reader, and now we could print data. And now it's in a list that you could work with. It really depends on what you want to do with the data. And here we go. So we have a list of lists. So just remember, this does not give you a list by default. It's an iterator. So we can iterate over it, we can loop over it and do something with the data. But if you want to have access to the data after that, or you want to save it, store it all in memory at once, then you can turn it into a list. So it just depends on what you want to do. But this video is really more about showing you the two ways of importing and reading the data. So that's one, using reader. The next I'll show you is using dict reader. So I'm just going to copy this code over. Remember the difference, aside from the syntax of importing dict reader and calling dict reader instead of reader, everything else looks the same. The difference is in how each row is represented. Here, a row was a list. Over here, a row is an ordered dict. And an ordered dict is a dictionary that has an order to it. So it's a special collection in Python. Let me just show you what it looks like. I'll copy this, paste it in here. Everything's the same except we're importing dict reader from CSV. And we can just print each row now. It returns to us an iterator again. Let me clear so we can make space. If we run it again, here's what we get. Each row is an ordered dict object. And like I said, it's just like a dictionary where you can access data using a key. And the magical part is that the keys are set up automatically to be the headers. So we could use name and get Ken. We could use country and get India. So let me show you that here. Let's go back. And this is an iterator again, so we can only go over it once unless we cast it to a list or some other format in memory and actually have it all in memory at once. But for now, let's just, instead of printing row, let's just print row name. I think it was capitalized, was it? Yes, capital N name. If I do this, there we go. So we don't have to worry about the headers being the first row anymore because each row has the headers interspersed as the keys. And we can tell it's an ordered dict because name is always coming first before country, before height. They're in the same order. Okay. So again, both examples here using a reader. This is going to give you an iterator, and each row is going to be a list. This dict reader gives you an iterator, and when we iterate over it or through it, each row is an ordered dict, which is a special Python collection we haven't really seen before, but you can treat it as just a dictionary. You access data using keys. There's one other thing I forgot to mention, which is we can actually use CSV files that aren't technically separated by commas as long as they're separated by the same character. That character is known as the delimiter, and it's supposed to be a comma, but you may have a file that's delimited using a pipe like this. And if that's the case, all you have to do is specify using a keyword argument, just like this. So if I copy it over here, I actually already have fighters2.csv that I've made. And if I just select all of these and replace it with a pipe instead, or anything, a star character. Now you do want to be careful because if you use something like, a number that exists, then you're going to run into problems if your number exists in anywhere else in your data. So you want to use something that is unique. But if I do this now, then I have this other file delimiter. We can either do as a reader or as a dict reader, it doesn't matter. But if I just print the rows now, oh, and I make sure I change this to the right file name, fighters2.csv, this file here, run it now. There we go. Successfully parses all the data. And, just to show you, we could do a $sign if we wanted to. Not exactly the best idea, but if we replaced all of these with a $sign instead, and if I run the code, it still works. Okay, so that's that. You can work with other delimiters if you have to.